Well, we shift gear now to matters pertaining. It's the 2nd day of October 2018. It's the World Farm Animal Day, and it's marked annually. Yeah. And globally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. On my immediate right is Dr. Joan Magero. She is the Assistant Director of Veterinary Services, the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries here in the country. Of course, at pole position to explain to us about what it is all about. And on my far right is Dr. Victor Yamo from World Animal Protection and Campaigns Manager for Sustainable Agriculture in the country, and of course beyond, because that's a global initiative. Thank you so much for joining us on set. I'm happy to have doctors on set because you learn a lot from them. Well, yeah. Dr. Joan, to start with you, this is an annual event that is marked across the globe. How important is it, and what message do you convey, or how is the package all about? Is there, beyond the point of just by the name World Animal Farms Day, is there a bigger issue that we need to understand?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to say that Farm Animal Day is a day that was set aside so that we can be able to think about the animals that we use on the farm. Okay. And that is because these animals are actually living beings, and they are sentient, meaning that they have feelings, they feel pain, they have perceptions just like human beings, and they have a conscience. And this day was actually founded to highlight the poor conditions that people keep these animals, especially on the farms, for the use, and also to promote awareness in the hope that we could be able to improve their lives as we use them. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Victor, coming to you. Yeah. Then when you think about, or the way Dr. did express herself about this, generally I sense that there is need for welfare for the animals. Yeah. So in the context of the World Farm Animal Day, how does it come into the discussion?
Okay, I think where we need to start the discussion is what animal welfare is all about. And animal welfare, simply put, is how an animal copes with the environment in which it's living in. And essentially how it then gets into this discussion is what environment are we keeping animals in, and how are we managing those, that animal, the farm animal in this context. And so internationally there's then a discussion and an agreement on how we assess animal welfare. And animal welfare is assessed on 5 pillars. Okay. The first one, they're actually called freedoms, which would loosely be equated to rights if we are looking at the human situation. But in humans, while we call them rights in humans, in animals we call them freedoms. And the 5 critical ones, the first one is freedom from hunger and thirst, which is essentially to say that an animal must be provided with good quality food that meets its nutritional status, and water. And water is one big nutrient that farmers have a challenge with if you're looking at farm animals in context. And we normally say water should be wholesome, which is to say water which you and I can drink is what you need to give to animals in a production system. The second thing is freedom from discomfort, which is about the housing. Is the house well ventilated? Does it have enough bedding or litter, depending on what species you're dealing with? Does it have enough space for the animal to be able to move around and to exercise and to do what it needs to do? The third freedom is freedom from pain, injury, and disease. Animals must be healthy, especially if you're looking at production animals, farm animals. If they are not healthy, they don't produce optimally. If they are sick, the chances that some of those diseases would get into human population, and that is what makes this very important. Okay, yeah.
Dr. Joan, coming to you, this is a time that was created in the memory of the late Gandhi, and I'm sure globally it has had with regard to reaching out to the people in this case in terms of ensuring that you do deliver the message about welfare program of the animals on their farms. Since inception up to now, fast forward to today in 2018, is there a success story about it in terms of raising the awareness bar? How high have you raised it? Yes,
we've been raising awareness every day, and since this day was set aside, it's actually brought the stakeholders together to really think on the production animals and the intensification of these production systems. And this was brought about by increased population in the world, which sees people really getting into eating more of these animal products. So this exerted a lot of pressure on animals. And so because of that, because of this day, a lot of awareness has been brought into the production systems, because you find that animals are kept in en masse, so that they could be able to get enough products to feed the population. So in that case, we have very many success stories, and especially in Kenya, we find that a lot of awareness had been brought to the consumers, and the consumers are now demanding to get food from animals that have been raised in an animal welfare manner.
Dr. Victor, when you speak about the welfare, here the most important aspect too is to create perhaps a sense of a two-channel here of, say, symbiotism here, for the people to benefit and the animals to benefit. Housing, protection, I mean, checking after their health too is important. Does it mean that also humans need to put or understand from their perspective that despite reaping a lot from the animals in terms of making them, in terms of using them to farm and getting the byproducts of that after harvest, then if you don't, does it mean if you don't look after the welfare of the animals, it means that this is going to be having a trickling down effect and it will hamper your progress in terms of farming?
That's exactly what you're trying to say. I think it is important to understand that animal welfare is, number one, very important to the animal. Because if you mishandle the animal, you end up in situations where either one, the animal will not produce optimally. And remember, one of the big 4 agenda items is about food security. So if you do not handle the animal well and look at its welfare, your food security will be challenged. The second thing is that if they are not handled very well, you end up with disease conditions, or you end up introducing things that would negate the food safety. In this case, we are talking about things like antibiotics. It has been seen that a lot of antibiotic use in a production system is because the welfare of the animal is not being catered for, so we are using it to mask that process. And those antibiotics then end up in the food chain. Remember, whatever you put on the animal ends up on your plate. And that's why, as Joanna said, it's important to then get consumers to start asking the hard questions. And I think the critical thing that I must say from an organizational perspective, it's not that we're saying we should stop eating meat or products from animals. We are saying that let's use animals, but use them humanely, so that the animal is not harmed. The animals who needs are catered for, it is fed properly, it's got enough space, it's vaccinated so that it doesn't get diseases. And that way then we are able to get good quality products. In fact, a recent research study done by University of Nairobi on large-scale poultry farmers in Nairobi and its environment has shown that farmers are actually losing out because of poor welfare practices. If I give a good example, if the chicken house is not catered for well, because this study was done in a poultry production system, if the chicken house is not well ventilated and it doesn't have enough bedding, what tends to happen is the animal then has wet bedding because of the poor environment it's in. The animal lies on that bedding with a lot of manure, ammonia, the manure in it, which then has an impact on the breast. You end up with blisters. That product in a processing plant will be condemned or downgraded, which means the farmer doesn't make money as much as they should have. The second thing, during that study, we found that if you are transporting animals, especially chickens, again, and they're not transported well, and you and I see the kind of transportation we have, chickens hanging on handlebars, pigs being tied behind motorbikes. That animal, by the time it gets to the processing plant, number one, it could have a bruise or an injury or a broken limb, which means it will be downgraded and the farmer doesn't make good money out of it. But for the consumer, why it's critical that you look at all these things is that the consumer then ends up with a product, because it's been manhandled, maybe because of a bruise in it, that becomes a foci for bacterial contamination. And that means you can end up with food poisoning or disease from eating that product. So it's important for us to understand that animal welfare is not just about animals, but it's also about the quality and the level of productivity that finally ultimately ends up in our production system.
We have spoken from an organizational perspective, also the government perspective, but let's also now take the debate or shift it to the farmers themselves, in this case, who have the direct contact in terms of lessening the proximity because they're within the radius of reach. Now, what is then the barrier or the hurdles on the way of these farmers in exercising better welfare programs for the animals? If, say, it is education, then how are you raising the bar? How are you having that conversation with them in terms of educating them, empowering them on the importance of animal welfare programs? And if, say, there are other problems too, how are you modulating or coming up with a formula of measures to ensure that you arrest the situation at hand?
Now, there are so many programs that are taking place within our country and within our borders, and especially being carried out by other organizations like the World Animal Protection in partnership with the government. And that is mainly to raise awareness to the farmer so that he's able to raise his animals in an animal welfare manner. Now, there are so many hurdles because people tend to think that keeping animals in an animal welfare manner is expensive. However, as he says, it has been found that it is really not expensive, and it is for the good of the animal and also for the good of the farmer. So there are many programs, and right now, as we speak, there are several other fora where people are talking about animal welfare and production systems. And the extension staff, I know they are not very many within the government sector. They do a lot of extension work at the grassroots to work with the farmers so that the animals are able to be raised in an animal welfare manner. Now you find that in our setup, the government has put many things in place, like in our constitution. The mandate of the county government, one of the mandates that they were given was to look at the issues of animal welfare at the grassroots. And so right now, many county governments are putting structures in place to deal with the issues of animal welfare at the grassroots and to help the farmers overcome their challenges.
Okay, then you have also spoken from the perspective of the county government and the fact that there is some form of cooperation between the national and the counties. But equally, Dr. let me come to you on this, Victor. It also calls for the fact that there's need for the intervention of the general public with regard to their role that they need to play out here. Because at some point, they are the people who are in charge, who have that touch with these animals. So what is their role then in terms of, if they're in the no say, what is their role in uplifting the standards of these animals? Because at the end of the day, poor welfare means poor products. Good welfare means good products.
Thank you. I think the biggest role for us as consumers and the general public is to start asking ourselves, where does the food I eat come from and how has it been treated? Because that then informs you your buying decisions. And big producers globally, if you look at what has happened globally, are driven by consumer choices and consumer demands. And what you're trying to get Kenyans and Africans, because I work for an African organization, office, is to understand that you have the power to change the life of that animal that you're going to consume. You have the power to demand that the producer does certain things, by how you purchase. I'm sure you've seen in various clips how animals are handled or how we produce our crops at a certain level, and people have then been able to ask certain things to be done in a right way. So part of what we're doing is to ask Kenyans to start engaging us and engaging government and engaging producers in beginning to ask. And if you look at trends, for instance, in this country, people have begun to understand and appreciate that white meat is healthy, so you can see a good chunk of your generation and my generation beginning to eat less red meat. The same process that they're going through to make that decision is to then ask ourselves, what is it that I want to consume and where is it coming from? And can I then ask either government to create the right regulations or can I ask industry to have the right standards so that I am guaranteed as a consumer that ultimately what I'm consuming is not only healthy but is also good quality and the animal that has been used to produce it has not been mistreated. And that's why it's important to, as you started off by saying that this day is actually, 2nd of October is actually Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And that's why it was put there, because Mahatma Gandhi said that you can know the level of the people or where the people are in terms of their governance, etc., by how they treat the animals. So if you look at how we treat our animals, whether how we carry them to the market, how we handle them on the farm, do we provide them with the right products, do we provide them with the basic needs, food, water, and a comfortable environment. tells us much about what else and how we look like as a nation.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. John, I'll come to you on this. Then it means that you are the government side from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. It means that then you are in a position to provide veterinary services to these animals. Suppose the farmers now identify or establish there's a problem with the animal in terms of their health. Then they bring forward to the government agencies to treat the respective animals. What packages are there for the different animals that are on our farms by the government, so that if need be, then you come into play?
Actually, the government from a very long time ago has always had the issues of animal welfare in its agenda. And we have so many laws that mandate the Directorate of Veterinary Services. Yeah. And that is the ministry as a whole, because the Directorate of Veterinary Services is the department, or is the directorate that has been mandated to take care of the issues of animal health and animal welfare. So almost several laws that we have in place that assist the government to be able to control the issues of animal welfare and animal health. And that is because there are so many diseases that can come from animals to human beings. Now, the first frontline stuff that is there between the diseases that can cross from animals to humans is the Directorate of Veterinary Services. And that's why we have several laws that govern when it comes to issues of disease control, for example. And that is the law that is used to control the diseases, as you say. So the privatization of veterinary services gave also the mandate of treating animals to the private sector. So all that, the private sector, the private veterinary sector, veterinarians, the government veterinarians, all that form the veterinary services in the country. And one of their mandate is actually to see that the animals are treated in a sustainable manner.
Okay, Dr. Victor, one final question because of time too. And when you speak about all this that we have at hand, is generally speak to the fact that there's need to create an environment that the animals can dwell well, for better yields for the farmer. And then when the farmer provides the market, then the consumers buy that market, or they consume those products from the market. It then feeds into the society, generally meaning that it's having that sense of a chain from the animal to the farm, to the farmer, to the market, to the consumer out there. Now, to sustain that chain, it means that we need to have a long-termism solution or measures rather than short-termism. I mean, how are we bringing this mismatch in the sense that we have a clean environment for the animals to survive too, and have better yields or products from the farm, and we have a healthy consumer out there?
I think one of the things we are looking at, and I want to look at it from a global perspective, because you realize that the market that we are operating in is global. And you can see big international brands coming into this country. You've seen KFC, Burger King, Nando's, etc., etc. I think the challenge we have as a country, beyond looking at our food security, is to start asking ourselves, is what we are producing meeting international standards? And if it's meeting international standards, how then are we driving that agenda so that our farmers are able to leverage and get high value into the high value market? And what I think we've not looked at critically as a nation or as Africans is that the high value market is no longer out there. When we were younger, we used to talk about getting our beef into the European market, but that market has now come into Nairobi. Down the road, there's KFC, there's Steers, there's all these big brands. These big brands are coming with international standards. They're looking for products that meet certain animal welfare standards, certain health standards, etc. So it's for us to then work with our farmers, through the government, through all the players, the consumers, to have standards that then ensures that our farmers are not only producing, but they are also able to sell. And the classical example, as I conclude, that I give, if you look around, we say KFC tells us clearly that they do not use Kenyan potatoes because Kenyan potatoes doesn't meet a certain standard. And that's why if you go to a KFC, what you're eating is Egyptian potatoes. That's the same thing we are trying to drive in the animal welfare sector to how ensure that our chicken that is produced locally by Kenyan farmers are able to get into these big fast food chains and ensures that our farmers then earn optimally and we are eating what is locally produced that then serves this nation, both in terms of food security, but also meets the livelihoods of the farmers and ensures that the consumers are having a healthy, wholesome product. Okay,
and a general standard of perhaps having the middle level ground, and it's perhaps a good discussion pertaining to the welfare of the society at large too. But thank you so much, Dr. Victor Yamo, Human and Sustainable Agriculture Campaigns Manager, World Animal Protection, and Dr. Joan Magero on my immediate right. She is the Assistant Director of Veterinary Services at the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. Thank you so much for making time.